The legal documents arrived on a Tuesday morning, sliding through my mail slot like a knife through my carefully constructed world. As I stared at the official seal, my hands trembling, I realized that my "it's complicated" excuse wasn't just ruining my marriage anymore. It was about to cost me everything I'd ever cared about. The evening light filtered through our suburban kitchen windows as I scrolled through my phone, pretending to check work emails. Really, I was rereading Marc's latest text. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same time, same place." "Cal, dinner's ready," Eli called from the dining room, his voice carrying that familiar note of careful politeness we'd developed over the past few months. Everything between us had become so polite, so measured, like we were roommates instead of husband and wife. I slipped my phone into my pocket and joined him at the table, where our 7-year-old daughter Sophie was already cutting her chicken into precise little squares, just like her father taught her. "How was work today?" Eli asked, serving himself some rice. His dark hair was still damp from his post-work shower, and he'd changed into the comfortable sweater I'd bought him last Christmas. Back when things were different between us. "Busy," I replied, which wasn't entirely a lie. I had been busy, just not with work. "I might need to stay late again tomorrow. Big project coming up." Eli's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Another late night? That's 3 this week." "It's not my fault the company's understaffed," I said, hearing the defensive edge creep into my voice. "Some of us don't have the luxury of working from home whenever we want." The comment was unfair, and we both knew it. Eli's IT consulting work required long hours and plenty of travel, but he'd specifically arranged his schedule to be home more often after Sophie started first grade. "I'm not complaining about your hours," he said quietly. I miss spending time with you." Sophie looked up from her methodically arranged plate. "Why do you and Daddy talk funny now?" The question hit me like a slap. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "You use your work voice with Daddy, like when you talk to people on the phone." Eli and I exchanged glances across the table. Even our 7-year-old could sense the growing distance between us. "Grown-ups sometimes get stressed about work stuff," I said, reaching over to smooth Sophie's dark curls. "It doesn't mean anything's wrong." But something was wrong, and it had been wrong for months. The problem was, I wasn't sure I wanted to fix it anymore. After dinner, while Eli helped Sophie with her homework, I retreated to our bedroom to fold laundry. My phone buzzed with another text from Marc. "Thinking about our conversation today. You deserve someone who really sees you." I smiled, feeling that familiar flutter in my chest. Marc did see me, really see me. He saw the woman I used to be before I became just Eli's wife and Sophie's mom. With Marc, I was Calantha again, not just Cal or Honey or Mom. "Cal?" Eli's voice from the doorway made me jump. I quickly turned my phone face down on the dresser. "What?" "I was thinking maybe we could watch a movie tonight, after Sophie goes to bed, like we used to." I looked at him standing there, hopeful and handsome in that quiet way of his, and felt a stab of something, guilt, maybe, or just irritation, that he was trying so hard when it felt too late for trying. "I'm really tired," I said, "and I need to prepare for tomorrow's meeting." The hope faded from his eyes. "Right, of course." He turned to leave, then paused. "Cal, are we okay?" The question hung in the air between us. I could have said yes, could have made an effort, could have suggested we talk about whatever was happening to us. Instead, I said, "We're fine, Eli. You're overthinking things." Later that night, after everyone was asleep, I crept downstairs to get a glass of water. That's when I saw it, my coat draped over the kitchen chair where I'd left it, and Eli's reading glasses on the counter nearby. My stomach dropped as I remembered the coffee receipt in my coat pocket, the one from Marc's café, with his employee discount circled in red ink and a little smiley face drawn next to it. I checked the pocket. The receipt was still there, but it had been unfolded and carefully refolded. Eli had found it. The next morning, Eli was already gone when I woke up. He'd left coffee in the pot and Sophie's lunch packed on the counter, his usual thoughtful gestures that somehow felt more pointed now. No note, no goodbye kiss, just the evidence of his care and my growing guilt. At work, I tried to focus on spreadsheets and filing, but my mind kept wandering to Marc. We'd met 6 months ago when I'd started frequenting the little café near my office. He was different from Eli, spontaneous, artistic, full of stories about the music he was writing and the places he wanted to travel. He made me feel alive in a way I'd forgotten was possible. My phone buzzed with a text from Eli. "Where are you having lunch today?" The message was casual enough, but I could read the subtext. He knew about the receipt. "Probably just the deli downstairs," I typed back, then immediately felt annoyed with myself for lying. Why should I have to account for every coffee I bought? Another text. "Want me to bring you something? I could swing by your office." This was new. Eli never just swung by my office. I could picture him sitting in his home office, probably staring at that receipt, trying to piece together a puzzle he didn't want to solve. "I'm really busy today. Rain check." The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before his response came. "Sure. Love you." I stared at those 2 words on my screen. When was the last time I'd said them back? My desk phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. "Calantha, it's Jenna." My sister's voice was bright and cheerful, as always. Jenna was 4 years younger than me, still single, still optimistic about love and marriage in a way that sometimes made me feel ancient. "Hey, Jen, what's up?" "I was calling to see if you and Eli want to come to dinner this weekend. I'm trying out this new recipe I saw on Pinterest." "I'll have to check with Eli," I said automatically. "Is everything okay? You sound weird." Jenna had always been able to read me too well. "I'm fine, just work stress." "Are you sure?" "Because Mom said she ran into Maureen at the grocery store yesterday, and she seemed worried about you guys." Maureen. Eli's mother had never been my biggest fan, but she'd always been polite. If she was expressing worry to my mother, things must be more obvious than I thought. "Maureen worries about everything," I said. "You know how mothers-in-law are." "I guess, but if you need to talk..." "I'm fine, Jenna, really." After I hung up, I sat staring at my computer screen, not seeing the numbers and letters. Everyone was watching us, waiting for something to happen. The thought made me feel claustrophobic and defensive. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Marc. "Coffee later, I have something to tell you." I glanced around the office, then typed back. "Can't today. Eli's being weird." "About us?" "Maybe. I don't know." "Cal, we need to talk about this. About what we're doing." I stared at his message, feeling a familiar knot form in my stomach. Marc had been hinting for weeks that he wanted more than our coffee dates and long conversations. He wanted me to make a choice. "It's complicated," I typed back. "Everything's complicated. Doesn't mean we can't figure it out." I was still staring at my phone when my supervisor walked by. I quickly minimized the message screen and pulled up a spreadsheet trying to look busy. The afternoon dragged by in a haze of half-completed tasks and anxious thoughts. By the time I got home, I'd worked myself into a state of righteous indignation. So what if I had coffee with a friend? So what if I bought a muffin at his café? Eli was being paranoid and controlling, and I wasn't going to apologize for having a life outside our marriage. I found him in the kitchen, stirring something that smelled like his grandmother's beef stew recipe. Sophie was at the table, coloring in a workbook. "Smells good," I said, hanging my coat on the same chair as the night before. "Thanks." He didn't look up from the pot. "How was your day?" "Fine, busy." "Did you have lunch at the deli?" There it was, the question I'd been dreading. I could feel Sophie listening, even though she appeared absorbed in her coloring. "Actually, I ended up skipping lunch. Too much work." Eli finally looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, but a kind of tired disappointment that was somehow worse. "Cal, can we talk? After dinner?" About what? You know what? Sophie looked up from her coloring book. Are you guys fighting again? We're not fighting, sweetheart, I said quickly. Daddy just likes to worry about things. Eli's jaw tightened, but he didn't contradict me in front of Sophie. Dinner was a tense affair, filled with Sophie's chatter about school and long silences between Eli and me. I kept waiting for him to bring up the receipt, to accuse me of something, but he just ate his stew and asked Sophie about her math homework. After Sophie was in bed, I found Eli in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with the coffee receipt in his hands. So, I said, closing the door behind me. Are you going through my pockets now? I was looking for gum. Sophie asked if you had any. He held up the receipt. Want to explain this? I crossed my arms. It's a coffee receipt, Eli, not exactly evidence of a crime. It's from that café on 5th Street, the one that's 20 minutes from your office. So you told me you were having lunch at the deli downstairs, and this is time-stamped at 12:30. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. I changed my mind. Is that okay with you, or do I need to clear all my lunch decisions with you first? Cal. His voice was quiet, patient in that way that always made me feel like a child being scolded. Just tell me the truth. The truth about what? About buying a coffee? About having a life outside this house? About who Marc is? The name hung between us like a challenge. I could have explained then, could have told him about the friendship, about feeling lonely and invisible, about needing someone to see me as more than just a wife and mother. Instead, I chose the path that would hurt him most. You're being paranoid, I said. Marc is just the guy who works at the café. He's friendly. It's called customer service. Customer service doesn't usually include drawing smiley faces on receipts. Maybe he's just a nice person. You should try it sometime. Eli flinched like I'd slapped him. That's not fair. Isn't it? When's the last time you asked me about my day and actually listened to the answer? When's the last time you looked at me like I was interesting instead of just convenient? I ask about your day every day. No, you ask if I'm okay, if I need anything, if the house is running smoothly. You don't ask about me. Then tell me about you, he said, standing up. Tell me what's going on with you, because I feel like I don't know you anymore. I stared at him. This man I'd married 8 years ago, this good, decent man who deserved better than the person I was becoming. And instead of being honest, instead of trying to bridge the gap between us, I said the words that would widen it beyond repair. Maybe the problem isn't that you don't know me. Maybe the problem is that you never did. Marc's cafe was exactly the kind of place I'd always imagined myself belonging. Exposed brick walls covered with local artwork, mismatched furniture that somehow worked together, the smell of freshly ground coffee beans mixing with the sound of indie music and quiet conversations. It was the opposite of my suburban life, and that's exactly why I loved it. I found Marc behind the counter, his dark hair pulled back in a small bun, wearing the kind of vintage band t-shirt that Eli would never understand. When he saw me, his face lit up with that smile that had first caught my attention 6 months ago. The usual? He asked, already reaching for a cup. Actually, make it a large today. I need the caffeine. He studied my face while the espresso machine hissed and steamed. Rough night? You could say that. Marc finished my latte with a perfect leaf design in the foam, another small gesture that made me feel special, seen. Eli had never learned to make coffee art, had never thought to try. Want to sit? Marc nodded toward the corner table we'd claimed as ours over the past few months. I glanced around the cafe. It was the lunch rush, but Marc's coworker seemed to have things handled. Don't you need to work? I'm the assistant manager. Perks of the job. We settled into our usual spots, and I wrapped my hands around the warm cup, using it as an anchor against the anxiety that had been building since last night's confrontation with Eli. So, Marc said, leaning back in his chair, want to talk about what's bothering you? This was what I loved about him, the way he asked direct questions, the way he actually wanted to hear the answers. My husband found the receipt from yesterday. And? And he's asking questions. Marc was quiet for a moment, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. What kind of questions? About you, about why I come here, about whether I'm telling him the truth about my lunch breaks. Are you? The question was gentle but pointed. I looked at Marc, really looked at him. He was handsome in an effortless way, with the kind of creative energy that had been missing from my life for years. But more than that, he was interested in me. When I talked about feeling invisible at home, he listened. When I mentioned dreams I'd given up, he encouraged me to pursue them again. No, I admitted, I'm not. Cal. He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. We need to talk about this, about what's happening between us. My heart started beating faster. We'd been dancing around this conversation for weeks, both of us knowing we were crossing lines, but neither willing to name what we were doing. I know, I said. I care about you. A lot. And I think you care about me too. I did care about him. More than I should. More than was safe. It's complicated, Marc. Everything worth having is complicated. I have a daughter, a family. I can't just... I'm not asking you to do anything you don't want to do, he said softly. I'm just asking you to be honest about what you do want. Before I could answer, my phone rang. Eli's name flashed on the screen, and I felt a stab of guilt so sharp it took my breath away. I should take this, I said, pulling my hand away from Marc's. Hey, I answered, trying to sound casual. Hi, I was just calling to apologize for last night. I think I overreacted. Eli's voice was warm, conciliatory. He was trying to fix things, trying to bridge the gap I'd created, and here I was, sitting across from another man who was asking me to choose. It's okay, I said, not looking at Marc. I was thinking maybe we could go out this weekend, just the two of us, maybe that new restaurant you mentioned. Let me check my schedule. Cal, is everything okay? You sound distracted. I'm just at lunch. Can we talk about this later? Of course, I love you. The words hung in the air, waiting for a response. Marc was watching me, his expression unreadable. Me too, I said finally, and hung up. Your husband? Marc asked. Yeah. He's trying to fix things. It wasn't a question. Marc was perceptive enough to read between the lines of my half of the conversation. Yeah, he is. And how do you feel about that? I stared into my coffee cup, watching the foam art dissolve into abstract swirls. I don't know. Cal, look at me. I raised my eyes to meet his. I'm not going to pressure you, he said. But I'm also not going to pretend this is just friendship anymore. We both know it's more than that. He was right. Somewhere along the way, our coffee dates had become the highlight of my week. I found myself dressing more carefully on the days I knew I'd see him, checking my phone constantly for his messages, making excuses to stop by the café even when I didn't have time. I need to think, I said. I know. But Cal, don't take too long. This limbo we're in, it's not fair to any of us. Not to me, not to you, and not to your husband. I was about to respond when I heard a familiar voice from across the café. Well, small world. I turned to see Paul, Eli's older brother, standing near our table with a takeout cup in his hand and a knowing look on his face. Paul had never liked me much. He thought I was too high maintenance for his quiet, steady brother, and the expression on his face now suggested his opinion hadn't improved. Paul, I said, my voice sounding strangled. Hi. Cal. His eyes moved from me to Marc, taking in our intimate seating arrangement, our leaning-in postures, the way we'd quickly moved apart when he appeared. Having lunch? Just coffee, I said quickly. Right. Paul's smile was cold. Well, don't let me interrupt. I'm sure you two have lots to discuss. He walked away without another word, but I could feel his eyes on us as he left the cafe. My hands were shaking as I reached for my purse. I have to go, I said. Cal, wait. I can't do this right now. I practically ran out of the café, leaving Marc sitting alone at our table. But even as I hurried back to my office, I knew it was too late. Paul had seen us together, had seen the way we looked at each other, had drawn his own conclusions. And knowing Paul, those conclusions would reach Eli before the day was over. The restaurant was one of those family-friendly chain places with crayons on the tables and a menu designed to please everyone while exciting no one. It was Paul's choice, his birthday dinner, his pick, and I suspected he'd chosen it specifically because the bright lighting and open layout would make it impossible to have a private conversation. We were all there, Eli and me, Sophie colouring on her kids' menu, Paul and his wife Linda, and Maureen, Eli's mother, who'd been giving me pointed looks since we sat down. The only person missing was Jenna, who'd cancelled at the last minute with a convenient headache. "So, Cal," Paul said, cutting into his steak with more force than necessary. "How's work been? Keeping you busy?" "It's fine," I replied, focusing on my salad. I could feel Eli tense beside me. "That's good. Important to have outlets, ways to break up the routine." The emphasis on outlets wasn't lost on anyone at the table. Linda shot her husband a warning look, but Paul ignored her. "Paul," Maureen said quietly, "perhaps we could talk about something else." "Of course, Mum. I was just making conversation." Paul smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. "I was actually in that area of town yesterday. You know, near Cal's office. Stopped by that little cafe on 5th Street. Nice place." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Eli had gone very still beside me. "The coffee's good there," Paul continued conversationally. "Friendly staff, very attentive." "Daddy," Sophie piped up, oblivious to the tension crackling around the table. "Can I have dessert?" "Of course, sweetheart," Eli said, his voice carefully controlled. "Whatever you want." "I think I'll have the chocolate cake," she announced, then went back to her colouring. "Speaking of cake," Linda said brightly, clearly trying to redirect the conversation. "Paul, should we order yours now?" But Paul wasn't done. "You know what's funny? I could have sworn I saw someone who looked just like Cal at that cafe. With a friend." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat, could feel sweat gathering at the base of my neck. "Lots of people look alike," I said finally. "True, but this person was sitting very close to her friend. Very intimate." "Paul," Eli's voice was quiet but carried a warning. "What? I'm just saying it's a small world. You never know who you might run into." Maureen cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should focus on celebrating your birthday instead of discussing random encounters." "You're right, Mum. Family is what matters." Paul raised his water glass in a mock toast. "To family, and to being honest with the people we love." I felt something snap inside me. The guilt, the fear, the constant walking on eggshells, it all crystallized into anger. "You know what, Paul? You're right. Honesty is important." I set down my fork and looked around the table. "So let me be honest. Yes, I was at that cafe. Yes, I was with a friend. And yes, maybe I should have mentioned it to Eli, but I didn't think having coffee with someone required a full disclosure." "Cal," Eli said softly. "No, let me finish." I was warming up now, the words flowing faster. "I'm tired of feeling like I have to account for every minute of my day, every person I talk to, every coffee I buy. I'm a grown woman, not a child who needs supervision." "Nobody said you were a child," Maureen said carefully. "Didn't you? Because that's how it feels, like everyone's watching me, waiting for me to mess up, looking for reasons to criticize." "Maybe," Paul said, his voice deadly calm. "People are watching because you're acting like you have something to hide." The words hit their target. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment and rage. "I don't have to listen to this," I said, standing up abruptly. "Sophie, get your coat." "But I didn't get dessert yet," Sophie protested. "We'll get ice cream on the way home." "Cal, please," Eli said, reaching for my hand. "Sit down. Let's talk about this." "Talk about what? About how your family has already decided I'm guilty of something?" About how you're all sitting here judging me for having a friend. Is that what he is? Paul asked. A friend? The question hung in the air like a challenge. I could have said yes, could have diffused the situation, could have salvaged what was left of the evening. Instead, I let my anger make the choice for me. That's none of your business. The admission, or non-denial, sent shockwaves around the table. Linda gasped softly. Maureen closed her eyes. Eli looked like I'd punched him in the stomach. Mommy? Sophie's voice was small and confused. Why is everyone upset? I looked down at my daughter, at her wide eyes and crayon-stained fingers, and felt a rush of shame so intense it made me dizzy. But instead of backing down, instead of apologizing, I doubled down. Because some people can't mind their own business, I said, grabbing my purse. Come on, Sophie, we're leaving. I want to stay with Daddy, Sophie said, her lower lip trembling. Sophie, let her stay, Eli said quietly. I'll bring her home later. I looked around the table one more time, at Paul's satisfied expression, at Maureen's disappointment, at Linda's embarrassment, at Eli's quiet devastation. Then I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving my family behind. In the parking lot, I sat in my car with shaking hands and called the one person I knew would understand. Marc, it's me. Can we meet? I didn't go home that night until after 11, long after Sophie's bedtime, long after I knew the house would be quiet. I'd spent hours driving around, then sitting in Marc's apartment talking about everything and nothing, letting him convince me that I deserved better than a husband who didn't understand me and a family who didn't support me. The house was dark, except for the porch light Eli always left on for me. I slipped inside as quietly as possible, but I found him waiting in the living room, sitting in his reading chair with a manila folder in his lap. How's Sophie? I asked, hanging my keys on the hook by the door. Upset, confused, she asked me why you left without saying goodbye. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. I was angry. I needed some air. For 4 hours? I didn't answer. We both knew where I'd been, even if we weren't ready to say it out loud. Cal, we need to talk. It's late, Eli. Can't this wait until tomorrow? No. His voice was firm in a way I rarely heard. It can't. I sank onto the couch across from him, suddenly exhausted. Fine. Talk. He opened the manila folder and pulled out a stack of papers. Even in the dim lamplight, I could see they were printed screenshots, bank statements, phone records. I know about Marc, he said simply. My heart stopped. What do you mean? I mean, I know he's not just some friendly barista. I know you've been seeing him for months. I know you've been lying to me about where you go, who you're with, what you're doing. He held up one of the screenshots. It was a text conversation between Marc and me from 2 weeks ago, full of inside jokes and casual affection that looked damning in black and white. How did you get that? Does it matter? You went through my phone? You left it on the counter. It was buzzing with messages at midnight. I thought it might be an emergency. I remembered that night. I'd been in the shower when Marc had sent a series of texts about a song that reminded him of me. Sweet, innocent messages that suddenly seemed like evidence of something sordid. Those are just texts, Eli. Friends text each other. Friends don't usually say things like, I can't stop thinking about you, and you deserve so much better than what you have. He read the words in a flat, emotionless voice that somehow made them sound worse than they were. Or maybe they were exactly as bad as they sounded. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. I looked at him sitting there with his evidence and his hurt eyes, and I felt something break inside me. Not my resolve. That had been cracking for months. What broke was my ability to pretend this was all innocent, all explainable, all somehow his fault. I don't know, I said finally. You don't know. I don't know what it is, okay? I don't know what I'm doing or why I'm doing it or what I want to happen. But you know you're lying to me. Yes. And you know you're having an affair. The word hung between us like a blade. I'd been avoiding it, dancing around it, calling it friendship and connection, and anything but what it actually was. We haven't slept together. Yet. The single word carried the weight of inevitability. He was right. Marc and I were heading somewhere, and we both knew it. Cal. Eli's voice was softer now, almost pleading. Help me understand. What did I do wrong? What can I fix? The questions I'd been dreading, the ones that required me to look honestly at my marriage, at my choices, at the person I'd become. You didn't do anything wrong, I said, and meant it. Then why? Because I struggled to find words for feelings I'd been avoiding for months. Because I feel invisible. Because I feel like I'm just going through the motions of being your wife instead of actually being your wife. Because I look at my life and I don't recognize the person I've become. So you decided to become someone else with him. I didn't decide anything. It just happened. Bullshit. The profanity was so unlike Eli that it shocked me. Affairs don't just happen, Cal. They're a series of choices. You chose to keep seeing him. You chose to lie to me. You chose to text him instead of talking to me. You chose to leave our daughter at dinner tonight to go running to him. Each accusation hit home because each one was true. What do you want me to say, Eli? That I'm sorry? That I'll stop seeing him? That we can go back to the way things were? I want you to tell me if you love him. The question I'd been avoiding, even in my own mind. Did I love Marc, or did I just love the way he made me feel? I don't know. Do you love me? Another question I couldn't answer, and my silence was answer enough. Eli closed the folder and set it aside. When he looked at me again, his eyes were dry but devastated. I can't do this anymore, Cal. What does that mean? It means I'm done. I'm done with the lies, done with the excuses, done with feeling like I'm competing with someone else for my own wife's attention. So what are you saying? I'm saying I think you should stay somewhere else tonight. Give us both some space to think about what we want. And Sophie stays here, in her home, with the parent who didn't abandon her at a restaurant. The words stung because they were fair. Eli, I need you to leave, Cal, tonight. I stared at him, this man I'd married, this good man I'd somehow managed to destroy with my selfishness and confusion. Part of me wanted to fight, to argue, to demand my rights as his wife and Sophie's mother. But a bigger part of me was relieved. Fine, I said, standing up. I'll pack a bag. I already did. He nodded toward a suitcase by the front door that I hadn't noticed when I came in. I'll call you tomorrow. We can talk about arrangements. I picked up the suitcase, surprised by how light it was, how little I apparently needed from this life I'd been so eager to escape. At the door, I turned back. Eli? Yeah? I really am sorry. I know, he said. So am I. I spent the night at Jenna's apartment, lying awake on her couch and staring at the ceiling while she made concerned noises and offered advice I wasn't ready to hear. When my phone rang at 8 a.m., I expected it to be Eli calling to discuss visitation or logistics. Instead, it was an unfamiliar number. Mrs. Greaves, this is Patricia Wong from Hartley, Davidson and Associates. I represent your husband in a domestic matter. I need to schedule a time for you to be served with some documents. The words didn't compute at first. Served with documents? Divorce papers, Mrs. Greaves, and a temporary custody order. Are you available this morning? The world tilted sideways. Divorce papers? But we only talked last night. Mr. Greaves has been consulting with our firm for several weeks. He filed the papers yesterday afternoon. Several weeks. While I'd been having coffee with Marc, while I'd been lying about working late, while I'd been convincing myself that Eli was paranoid and controlling, he'd been quietly, methodically preparing for this moment. I need a lawyer. That would be advisable. Can you be at your residence at 10 a.m. for service? My residence? The marital home. Mr. Greaves will be there with his attorney. It would be best if you could be present as well. I hung up with shaking hands and immediately called Marc. Cal? What's wrong? He's divorcing me. Eli's divorcing me. Slow down. What happened? I told him about the phone call, about the lawyer, about the papers I hadn't even seen yet. Marc listened without interrupting, and when I finished, there was a long pause. Marc? Are you there? Yeah, I'm here. Cal, this is serious. I know it's serious. That's why I called you. No, you don't understand. If he's been planning this for weeks, if he has lawyers involved, he's not just angry. He's done. The finality in Marc's voice scared me more than the lawyer's call had. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe we should slow down, take a step back, let you figure out your situation. My situation. Your divorce, your custody battle, your life. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Are you breaking up with me? We were never together, Cal. Not really. We were just figuring things out. That's not what you said yesterday. Yesterday you said you cared about me, that you wanted me to choose. That was before lawyers got involved, before this got real. I stared at Jenna's ceiling, feeling the ground disappear beneath me. So you're abandoning me too? I'm not abandoning you. I'm being realistic. You have a daughter, Cal. You have a life to sort out. I can't be part of that right now. But I know what you thought. I thought it too. But this is different now. This is divorce courts and custody battles and financial settlements. This is real life, and I'm not ready for real life. The line went quiet. Then, I'm sorry, Cal. I really am. He hung up, leaving me alone with the wreckage of my choices. At 10 a.m., I stood on the porch of the house I'd shared with Eli for 5 years, waiting for someone to answer the doorbell. When the door opened, it wasn't Eli, but a woman, in a sharp business suit with a briefcase in one hand and a manila envelope in the other. Mrs. Greaves, Patricia Wong, we spoke this morning. Behind her, I could see Eli sitting at our kitchen table with another man in a suit, his lawyer presumably. Maureen was there too, holding Sophie's hand, while my daughter stared at me with confused, hurt eyes. Mommy! Sophie broke free from her grandmother and ran to me. Are you coming home? I knelt down and hugged her, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. I don't know, sweetheart. Mrs. Greaves, the lawyer said gently, we need to discuss some things. Sophie, why don't you go play in your room for a few minutes? I want to stay with Mommy. It's okay, I said, kissing her forehead. Go with Grandma. I'll see you soon. Maureen led Sophie away, but not before giving me a look that was equal parts pity and disappointment. I followed the lawyers into what had been my kitchen, where Eli sat looking like a stranger. He was dressed in his best suit, his hair neatly combed, his expression carefully neutral. This wasn't my husband. This was a man preparing for battle. Mrs. Greaves, Patricia Wong said, handing me the manila envelope. You're being served with a petition for divorce and a motion for temporary custody of your daughter. I opened the envelope with numb fingers. The papers were thick, official, full of legal language that boiled down to a simple message. Eli wanted out, and he wanted Sophie. Temporary custody? I looked up at Eli. You're trying to take my daughter away from me? I'm trying to protect her, he said quietly, from the chaos you've created. I'm her mother. You're also the parent who abandoned her at a restaurant to go meet your boyfriend. The words hit like a slap. That's not what happened. Isn't it? Eli's lawyer, a thin man with graying hair, consulted his notes. According to witnesses, you left your daughter at a family dinner after creating a public scene about your extramarital relationship. It wasn't like that. Then how was it, Mrs. Greaves? I looked around the table, at the lawyers with their briefcases and legal pads, at Eli with his careful composure, at the kitchen where I'd made breakfast for my family just yesterday morning. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. I was upset. I needed air. For 4 hours, I was thinking, where? The question was simple, but the answer would damn me. I could lie, but what was the point? They probably already knew. With a friend. Marc Danton. Hearing his name in this context, in this official setting, made everything real in a way it hadn't been before. Yes, the same Marc Danton you've been having an affair with for the past 6 months. We're not having an affair. Eli's lawyer pulled out a folder, thicker than the one Eli had shown me the night before. We have documented evidence of over 300 text messages between you and Mr. Danton over the past 4 months. We have bank records showing charges at his place of employment during times when you told your husband you were elsewhere. We have witness testimony placing you together in intimate settings. 300 messages. Had it really been that many? Mrs. Greaves, Patricia Wong said, her voice not unkind, this doesn't have to be adversarial. Your husband is willing to work out a reasonable custody arrangement and property settlement, but we need to establish some ground rules. What kind of ground rules? She consulted her own notes. No overnight visits with Sophie until living arrangements are stable. No introduction of romantic partners to the child without court approval. Mandatory counseling for co-parenting communication. And if I don't agree, then we go to court and a judge decides based on the evidence we've presented. I looked at Eli, trying to find some trace of the man who'd made me coffee this morning, who'd packed Sophie's lunch, who'd said he loved me just yesterday. Eli, please, can we talk about this privately? We tried talking, Cal, last night and for months before that. You chose Marc instead. I chose wrong, I know that now. Do you? Because according to phone records, you called him this morning. Before you called a lawyer, before you called your sister, before you thought about your daughter, you called him. The accusation was true and damning. Even in crisis, even facing the loss of everything, my first instinct had been to reach for Marc, and he'd hung up on me. That's different. Is it? I stared down at the legal papers, at the official language that was dismantling my life paragraph by paragraph. What do you want from me? I want you to sign the temporary custody agreement, Eli said. I want you to get help, and I want you to stay away from Marc until this is resolved. You can't tell me who I can and can't see. Actually, his lawyer interjected, the custody agreement includes a morality clause. Violation could result in suspension of visitation rights. The room was spinning. This morning, I'd been a wife and mother. Now I was a defendant in a custody battle, a woman whose choices were being dissected by strangers in suits. I need time to think. You have until 5 p.m. today, Patricia Wong said. After that, we file for emergency custody based on abandonment and moral unfitness. Moral unfitness? You left your child to meet another man, Mrs. Greaves. You've been conducting an extramarital affair while living in the family home. You've been lying to your husband and exposing your daughter to marital instability. A judge would consider those factors in determining custody. I signed the papers with a shaking hand, each signature feeling like a small death. When it was over, the lawyers packed up their briefcases and left me alone with Eli in our kitchen. I never meant for it to go this far, I said. I know. I love Sophie. Whatever you think of me, I love our daughter. I know that too. Then why are you doing this? Eli was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the backyard where Sophie's swing set sat empty in the morning sun. Because loving her means protecting her, he said finally, even from you. The words broke something inside me that I didn't know could break. I walked out of my house, former house, and drove to the only place I could think to go. But when I got to Marc's café, there was a closed sign on the door and no sign of him anywhere. I was completely, utterly alone.